Welcome to One Sharp Sword, cutting through to what matters most. I'm your host, Dr. Wayne Pernell, Dr. P, the Outfluencer, also known as the Powerful Presence Mentor. Today is a super special day. I met this gentleman. My guest today is Dr. Seku Gathers. Dr. G, yes. I met you about a year ago. I was actually on your podcast, The Truth Prescription, which is amazing, and we'll tell people how to reach you there. Your story is one of the reasons that you that I don't know, there was resonance with us, is that we both had sort of a bounce. Very similarly, I didn't have a life-threatening illness, but I had, my life was upside down, and it was in my bounce, I call it my pizza story, when I realized that I'd been going along to get along. I'd given away pretty much all of me.
Yeah,
Um, you have a story where you were faced with a life-threatening illness. You were going through divorce. You were living on barely anything, and had to turn your life around and realize that that was a huge gift.
yeah,
So talk a little bit about, because the doctor part of you, by the way, is for our audience, is you're an ER doc out of New York City
that's
during a
right.
time that is a very strange time in our
Curious.
in
We
our
call it curious.
it's a curious time. So talk a little bit about your bounce. Talk a little bit about where, like, what turned your life around, and how'd you get here?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, first of all, Dr. P, thanks for having me on your program, your show. I think it's important to, as you said, cut through the bullshit and get to the essence of what is true, which is what I try to do on my show, The Truth Prescription. Um, a friend of mine once said that we all have a time in our lives when something happens and then you basically put your middle finger up to your consciousness, like, screw you, I'm just going on my own trip now. And what happens when we have these traumatic events is we kind of get off kilter and off the railroad, off the tracks, and we have to find ourselves again. And when I say ourselves, like our true selves, who we really are, why we really here, um, and function, as talk about it, from the inside out, not the outside in. So for me, it started way back around like age 9. I had a series of traumas. So around age 9 or 10, the memory is fuzzy, but I was molested by a neighbor, an older um, adolescent. He was around 15, 14, 15 at the time. And that sort of took me in this really weird direction of just kind of being very introverted and not really knowing how to take it and not telling anybody, and I was having a lot of pain and trauma around it. And then fast forward, I got married to someone who I wasn't really compatible with, and some of the same feelings and emotions that happened when I was molested sort of resurfaced, and that was sort of why I made the decision to marry this particular person. She was abusive in her own right, um, but I attracted that, right? Because that was sort of the path that I was on, of feeling like the victim. So I must, my role in any relationship is to be um, a pleaser, or to be the one, like, my needs don't matter. And that's how I approached a lot of relationships, because I was sort of still scarred from that other situation. So that happened. And then, this is all after finishing med school. I was in residency, and I contracted hepatitis from a patient. And that situation completely derailed me again, because now I was in a position where I had to take care of myself. So my doctor was basically like, well, you can either take this medication, it's going to be really difficult, but you're not going to be able to work. And you're probably going to have to go on disability, and your lifestyle is going to change because you may need to be on this medicine for at least 2 years. And that's eventually what happened. And around that time, my things just really dissolved between my wife and I. I would say the fantasy was gone, right? Because I'm no longer a doctor, really. I mean, I'm still got the degree, but I'm not working as a doctor. That fantasy's gone. I'm making at one point I was making like what was it? It was around 1,000 or $1,200 a month or something like that. So the income is gone, and so around that time she left, and it was just me left all alone in this house that was I couldn't pay the mortgage on. That was and eventually got foreclosed on. But I was just sitting there by myself, realizing all there is me, and I have a choice. I can either sit here and die, or I can take this medication and try to bring myself back. And so the truth for me, that was the start of my show, the culmination of understanding that a lot of times we ignore truths. And the truth that I had ignored for so long is that I believed that I was a victim and therefore I functioned and operated in that sense. And once I accepted that, I was able to change it. So that's a short version of the long story.
Uh, Amazing, right? I realized all there is me, and I have a choice, right? That's the magic. And if that's what anybody can get out of what we're doing today,
Yeah.
that is the magic. I realized all there is me,
Yeah.
and I have a choice. And in the Powerful Presence program, step one is recognize that you get to choose to step into a greater you,
Yeah.
right? And there's like this, you were sort of contained in your own little egg, and it was at that point that you sort of pecked your way out, and you're like, oh no, I'm bigger than this, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I've created this. I don't deserve this, and now what am I going to do? But the point that you just made, I think it took me even longer to really realize. Like one thing I want your listeners to know, and I know you understand this as well, is that there's a difference between knowing something and understanding it, right?
Mhm.
So I can read an article and say, oh, okay. I can read an article, let's say, about a refugee and say, oh, okay, I know this. But until you've lived as a refugee, you don't understand what that whole process is really about. And for
Right.
me, the idea of choice, the fact that I literally have a choice in everything, I didn't really understand that to many, many years later. So that it takes time to understand that you really have a choice. But people that are listening, trust me, Dr. P knows this. You have a choice. Everything you do is a choice, period.
That's awesome.
You know?
That's awesome. So talk a little bit about your recovery. How did one sharp sword is about cutting through to what matters most,
Yeah.
which means you're cutting out what no longer matters. And talk a little bit about how you climbed out. Like you decided, okay, I have this choice,
Right.
and
Well,
and
it
it's
was
like, and I'm not going to just sit here anymore. Okay, what did you? Because choice also requires action,
sure,
right?
sure.
Yeah.
Well,
So,
I basically, I gave the summary, the Cliff Notes version, but there was a point some months before where I started treatment and failed because I wasn't at the point yet where I had enough self regard, I'll call it, to commit to the treatment protocol, which was daily injections and daily pills. And so I sort of failed that first time. The second time I went in, I had to basically rededicate again. This is a life or death situation. If I don't take this medication, I'm looking at worsening liver function, cirrhosis, which is basically when the liver shrinks up and it's no longer functioning. And then after cirrhosis is, liver, you need a liver transplant. But people with transplant, they just don't do well. So my options were very clear. Take care of yourself, something that life's been trying to teach you for a while that you're not listening to, or uh, basically leave the planet. You're going to die. And so when it was clear that those were the two choices, I made a commitment. I self-committed to I'm going to do this regimen. And so for it was about a year and a half, I injected myself every day and took these pills every day. And these injections were painful. And it was just tough. I was underweight. I was probably like right now, I'm probably 179, 80 pounds. I was 130 pounds, 120 pounds. I wasn't eating because I wasn't hungry because the medicine is basically like chemo. It makes you nauseated. Um, I really didn't. I was so weak that just to talk to people on the phone was just too much. And so really, I really had to just dedicate to doing the things that I knew would kind of get me out of recovery, get me to recovery. Because after the
Did you?
first 4 months, the doctor was like, "Oh, your viral load is you've been doing this. I can tell your viral load is now 0, but you have to continue to take the medicine for about another year to make sure that it doesn't come back." So once I did that, the dedication, I remember it was October because it was the reason I remember my last injection because it was the day of the New York City Marathon, October 31st,
Mm.
2010. And my dad, in celebration, he took me because I was living on Long Island. He took me into Manhattan to a hotel and we kind of hung out in the hotel and we could see the runners. It was a really nice memory. Um, but that was the start, and I'll let you jump in. I don't want to jump in. That was the start of the physical healing. That was the start and end of the physical healing, but the next stage was the emotional healing.
So along the way, did you have this image? Because you had I mean, over a year and a half, almost 2 years of injecting yourself every day, feeling sick every day, feeling like, ugh. Did you have an image of what the outcome would be? Because it's, at some point you go, another day, another injection, another day of feeling crappy. Like, why bother? Unless you've got this, I know there's an outcome that is greater than where I am now. Did you have that in mind to
That's an
pull you
interesting question.
through?
I didn't. I really didn't. I really took it one day at a time because there was a couple things going on with me at that time that was really life teaching me patience. One was my divorce. My divorce from end to end took 3.5 years, which is like unheard of.
Yeah.
I had to actually go, and every month I'm thinking, all right, this is going to be the month it's over. And so I had to be very patient with that process and really take it one step at a time, not knowing. It's interesting taking one step at a time, not knowing where the end is. It's
Yes.
tough, right? But often that's life. Life is often like that. That you
It's very interesting. Here's something for you to think about, right? You took your last injection on the day of a marathon.
yes,
Now,
nice.
a marathon has a finish line.
It does, yes.
People right around, just around 2/3 of the way through the marathon, they're like, I'm done. Like I'm just done. But they keep going. They keep going.
Yes,
I've run 4 half marathons,
nice.
which is 13 miles, right? So right around mile 9, I'm like, can a cart just kind of come and pick me up? I just don't want. I'm like, I'm done. And what happens is there's a mindset shift that
Sure.
goes, like, for me, it's like, wait, I'm at mile 9, mile 13 is the finish. I know how to run 4 miles,
Yeah.
right? And so at some point you go, all right, I've run this marathon. And you knew, I guess, coming up to it, which is, it's kind of cool that you did. You finished your last injection on the
Yeah.
day of a marathon.
Yeah, that is cool. I so with the body it's a little bit different because and the treatment a little bit different because they couldn't tell me definitively. They knew about the time, but they couldn't tell me definitively like when it would be. And it was I think my last visit before that last injection was a month before, and she said, you know what, you've had X amount of numbers for about 17, 16 months. I think you just need to do one more month and you'll be good. You've been testing negative. And so that's how I knew. But it took me basically just having faith and doing it just day in day out to get to a point where someone could tell me, "Oh, you've got a month left." So
Yeah,
that's the tough part. Because sometimes in life, like we're doing stuff, but we don't really know where the end point is going to come. Right?
right.
We just have to have faith that we know that we're doing what we can do. We're doing the right
That's huge. That's huge, right? Marathon runners know that it's a 23-mile race or
thing.
21.2, um, something like that.
Yeah.
And 13.1, so 26.2, right?
26.2. Right.
Yeah. So marathon runners know there's an end.
Yeah.
You were running a marathon where the finish line kept changing.
Right. It was
And
unclear. Same thing with the divorce. Like every time we go into court, it'd be like, oh, it's gonna be done. My ex spouse would be like, yeah, okay, we agree to these things and we'll be done in 2 months. And we go back in 2 months. They're like, we don't know what you're talking about. We never said. So
wow.
it was that for 3.5 years. It was crazy. It was crazy.
And it's interesting. I mean, right now, as we record this, we're coming into the third month of a stay-at-home order due to a
Yes.
pandemic,
Correct.
and the targets keep changing.
Yes.
Well, you can go out, not really, but you could go out with a mask, but not really. Well, you can. And so there's a lot of the same kind of psychology that's happening now, which is, will this ever be done? And how are we going to get through? And the faith is we will get through.
We will.
This is hard. We will get through.
We will.
That's
Yeah.
tricky.
The
So,
tough part is in the process staying sane, right?
yeah,
Staying sane, not knowing the end point. That's tough. It's tough.
that is
To
tough.
be done, but it's tough.
It is tough. You know, what's interesting is you start to look at what matters, and that's part of the process that I'm certain you went through. That was part of your bounce. What I call the bounce is like, dang, everything's falling apart, right? Boom. Now what? now you come back up.
The balance. I like that.
Yeah. Well, we all, at some point when we grab a hold of our lives, it's at a point where we go, there's more. There has to be more. And I am bigger than this point in my life.
Yeah.
Boom. And it's not like, oh, I mean, for some people, they hit rock bottom.
Sure.
For most of us, it's sort of like, where I am isn't where I want to be. I know I'm bigger. Let's go. And you don't even know what the fight is going to be, but you have to do it. You have to climb this mountain
Yes.
without knowing how tall it is. So,
Right.
um, so you did it,
Tough.
right? You
Yeah,
did
I
it.
did it and I'm doing it.
Yeah,
I'm still there's still I think as time goes on, the lessons get subtler and subtler. They're not as like in your face as a life threatening disease. It becomes like stuff like, hey, I'm snacking too much at night. You know what I mean? Like, oh, there's this business idea that I'm trying to figure out, and I keep running into this frustration. So I think it still goes on. It just becomes a little more subtle.
that's awesome. I'm making notes because that's awesome too. Life lessons get more subtle.
Yeah, for at least that's what I've seen from me. They've gotten a lot more subtle. I remember my mother used to tell me, the older you get, what did she used to say? The older you get, the more the decisions have consequences. Something along those
It's
lines.
interesting.
I'm not really sure how that relates to the subtlety, but anyway, that's my mind. So
Well, we honor your mom, that's
exactly.
awesome. Today, just using that, the idea of what we do today gives us either consequences or results,
Yeah,
right? So for those of us staying at home, right, sheltering in place, staying at home, um, the way we're living our lives is really affecting what happens 2 months down the road, 3 months down the road. What are you eating? How are you exercising?
I
What's your mindset? Like, is it, oh, everything, like the world is exploding or imploding and why bother? Or is it, when we're out of this is what I value, right? And it
yeah,
was your values that carried you through. So
yeah,
talk a little bit about what you're doing now. Like, you are an active ER doc, right?
yes,
Emergency room doctor.
right.
So you're like a superhero. You're saving lives every day. And
Right. So I'm board certified emergency medicine, ER doc. I don't spend as much time there as I did, let's say, before my illness.
yeah,
Um, since sort of leaving when I left the emergency department and I came back, I just kind of came back really less than part time, 4 or 5 days a month. But with the pandemic, I had worked a little bit more because there was a little bit more of a need, and I was listen, I have the skills, I have the talents. If I can, add some benefit to this, I'll do it. But my main thing is I run, obviously, about the Truth prescription, and So that's a whole thing that requires time and articles and interviewing folks and reading and reaching out to the listeners. I have a pain management business, which consists of 4 clinics, and we really do like, I call it more holistic. We don't do a lot of like narcotics. We do a lot of um, trigger point injections and massage therapy and acupuncture and those more natural healing modalities. Um, and then recently we opened a podcast studio, which closed with the pandemic. But podcast studio has been great, meeting a lot of people from all over the city, coming in, using the space to record their show. So, at heart, I'm a creative guy. I was putting together I don't know if you know this about me. I was putting together a creative resume because I had to apply for a grant. And I've done like 8 films since 2016, either produced, directed, or written short films. So, that's really the direction, media, film, communication. That's really the direction my life is going at this point. I still love medicine. Medicine has allowed me, to help people and interact and heal. And, but I always say you got a left brain and a right brain. So I really like using both of them. And so that's kind of
So actually, I didn't know that about you, which is fabulous, right? That's amazing.
yeah.
Uh, I knew you did the Truth Prescription as a creative outlet and a way of touching more people's lives. And it's an amazing show. I knew you were an ER doc, and that was slowing down.
Yeah.
And I didn't know you'd done you'd done films.
Yeah.
So talk a little bit about that. Like, what were the subjects, and what's the next project you're working on?
Sure. Well, let me jump into. So I talked about basically the body, healing the body. When I came out, part of my emotional healing was actually acting school because I realized that I had been really living someone else's life and I wasn't authentic. And part of performing when you're an actor, you have to give an authentic performance. If you don't give an authentic performance, the audience knows and they don't feel it. And so there's something about standing there doing your monologue or doing a scene with a scene partner and you're completely engrossed in that moment and you're true to yourself. Even though you're playing a different character, you're standing in some truth. That helped me with a lot of things, but just at a very basic level, learning how to just be authentic and real and be able to emote and be expressive. And so through that process, one of my acting school teachers was like, "Hey, you're a good writer," because we would have to write scenes sometimes. It's like, "You're a really good writer. Why don't you write a short film and we'll shoot it?" And I was like, "Okay." So that's where it started. And my first film was actually about, dun dun dun, dun a pedophile who meets his victim. And after 30 years after getting out of jail, and they have a conversation about what happened, and they don't agree on the details of what happened, but it comes to we'll say exciting conclusion. So that was my first film.
Wow,
Um, I've done.
that had to have been cathartic for you.
At the time I didn't think it was, but I think it
Yeah,
was.
yeah, because you've been carrying it around, right?
Yeah,
Carrying that story around, and
yeah,
and
yeah.
who knows, right? What the in terms of truth, there's so many truths, and for when you carry something for that long, we have this psychological need to bolster ourselves against the real truth while we carry the harshness with us, and so things get distorted, and so what comes out, what's real is what's real now, right?
Right.
It's the story you tell yourself now. And so wow, being able to put your words on a page and then have it turn into a film,
Yeah.
that's something.
And a film that was shown in the film festival, Chelsea Film Festival in 2016. So that was great. A lot of, if I could just put them all together, a lot of my films really deal with, you know, exposing what's real. I mean, ultimately, different stories, different, but that's really what it's about. The one I did last year, which was in the Newark Film Festival, I produced that one, was about a guy who's who's a racist. He's a racist. He's a Trump supporter, and he's in this virtual reality world, and he's talking to this other guy who he thinks is also a racist, but he finds out that it's actually his black grandson at the end, and so everything about what he thought was just completely off. But they go on their own journey and conversate about many things. So that's I think that's really the crux of what I do. What's coming, I hope. Like I said, I've done 8 shorts. I hope to do a feature film. Written a script, feature film script. Been working on it. It's like 2 years. It needs some work, but yeah, that's the next thing, to try to do a feature.
That's awesome. I'm smiling so big right now. I can't wait. Like, what comes out of you is, what comes out of you is so thoughtful. It's so, it's thought-provoking. It's thoughtful. It's heart-centered. Just so good. Just so good. Yeah. Yeah.
One life to live, man. That's how I feel. One life to live. So gotta get it done.
Yeah. So, wow. What?
You're like really thrown by this film thing.
Well, it's so good. It's like, wow, this whole new part of who you are, which is so fabulous. If you were to offer advice to somebody coming to you saying, well, I feel like I've been going along to get along. I feel like I've been giving my life away to other people, doing, I've made nice in the world. I've been playing, I've been playing low, and I know it now. But how do you play bigger, right? If someone actually were able to put those words together, what would you say to them? I've been playing small, and I know it, and I know I've been giving my life away to small choices, right?
Yeah. I tell them, get mad, get angry, fucking pissed off. Like, use that energy to your benefit, to your advantage. Like, there's no motivator like like anger properly placed. Like, I'm not saying go out and start shooting people and beat people up, but that was one of the things that hit me. Like, I got angry. Like, man, I just been playing myself all these years, just doing all this stuff for other people and not caring about me. And it made me angry. And so the anger motivated me to try to do better. And it took a while. Like, even I remarried, and it was rocky in the beginning, more so because of me.
Yeah.
Because it was hard for me to really let her in. And so there's a process, but I think in the beginning, when you're really first trying to get out, you got to find something that's going to motivate you to change. And whatever that is, for me, it was just I was just angry. And I realized, like, I'm not doing this anymore.
That's awesome. That's part of the bounce. That is part of the bounce, that you come out of depression. You add a little bit of energy when you start to feel just a little bit better. When you add just a little bit of energy to depression, you actually get anger. And it's like, now you have to focus the anger appropriately, which is what you said. And appropriate placement of that anger is on your former self.
Yeah.
Not on your current self. It's like, how could I let that guy or that gal do that to me? I wouldn't do that to me now. And so you get mad at your former self, and that allows your current self to blossom.
Yeah. I think the other point that I would say, that you just brought it out, made me realize it, is, under every emotion is usually something else. So, if depression is on the top, usually anger and rage is right below that. So it's really about, it's not even get angry, it's really feel what you're really feeling, right? Because we're walking around being passive aggressive and trying to please everybody, but it's really what's really going on inside of you. And at the base, it's probably just a whole lot of anger and rage. So feel that shit. Feel
truly.
it, rap about it, scream, go, take action, whatever you need to do, but you gotta feel it. Because when you feel it, then you start really getting to actual feeling yourself. Like, who the hell, what am I? Who am I? And I think that's a great point.
Yeah. The other piece of that is you come to a realization that it really doesn't matter. And this is huge. It doesn't matter what other people think about you, right? At some point you go, I've given away all of myself. whoever the self was at that point. I've given myself away for what, to whom, and and do they even know? Do they even know that I've given myself away? And you start to realize it doesn't matter. So
Yeah,
if I feel like expressing myself, wow, right?
yeah,
What other people think about me is none of my business. Let them think it.
yeah.
I'm getting to be bigger, right?
Yeah, I think it goes back to that point I made before about knowing something and understanding it. Like I had a
Yes.
mentor who would tell me that all the time. He would look at me and be like, "Bro, like you're living great. You're by yourself. That you're not with her anymore." But it took time. That not caring what people think is so ingrained in so many of us that it takes a lot of time. Dr. P, to really, really, I call it exercise yourself from, from
Yeah.
that thinking.
Yeah.
It's hard. That's a hard. People that are listening, we're not saying these things to tell you, you should tomorrow be able to just stop caring what people think. It would take 2 to 3 years of practicing it every day to really like, you know, get some distance between it. It's hard. But so much of our indoctrination growing up is really about pleasing others. And
It
so
is.
you really to just completely reverse that is not easy.
That's so true. And it's, even though it takes a little while, it doesn't mean don't start, right? So please start
Right.
excavating, find out, there's this block of marble, and you chip it away, and over time is this beautiful sculpture. And that's the whole point, is we've allowed so much to be caked onto us
Mm,
that it's time to shake it loose. There's a concept called hermeneutics, which I think you'd appreciate. Hermeneutics basically says, to know I must understand, and to understand I must know. And it's a circular kind of thinking. It's a philosophy. But the
mhm,
piece about it is, to really understand, you actually have to put yourself in that space of. So, for example, we could say, well, in the 1800s, they were like, why did everybody drive horse driven carts? Like, why would they even do that? And then you go, well, let's put ourselves in that time, right? Right? So why did they do that? You put yourself back in a certain situation, you can look at your life through hermeneutic understanding, through, well, this is what I was feeling. This is what I was living. This is what caused this. Now I understand it. And that's the real understand versus know versus,
yeah.
like, you can look at it.
The way I think about it is knowing is in your mind, understanding is in your body.
Sure.
Just have
That's good.
a different.
It's it's visceral, right?
It's visceral. It's like I was reading a book. The guy was like, it's like telling me about sex and actually having sex. It's completely different.
That's awesome. Right. Right. There's no, and that's the other thing, right? There's no way that, I'm sitting here in California, a white dude that's grown up very differently. There's no way that I can truly, truly understand who you are. I can know a little bit about you. I can feel for you. I
Sure,
can have empathy,
sure,
but I certainly didn't live the life you lived, right?
sure.
And that it's like, we need to push to a place of like extreme empathy, to really engage with other people in a way to understand as much as we can,
Yeah,
right?
extreme.
And understand that each individual will still have their own life, right?
Yeah,
And so for us, it's a quest of, well, can I know myself, right?
that's all it is. That's all it is. Yeah. Life is a school, and that's the primary lesson.
That's
Who
awesome.
the hell are you?
Awesome. I never know, when I do interviews, I never know where it's going to go. For some, it's like, well, this is how I succeeded in business, and this is awesome. And for us, it's like deep life lessons. And
Yeah.
it's really, I think this is so important. What's what's your big next? What's your for you personally, your big next action step besides, prepping a meal for your family today? What's your big next action step?
Well, two things. We talked about the feature, but I want to start doing keynotes. So that's going to be the next thing for me.
Awesome.
Keynote talks. I'm working on the approach and the topic, but that's the next big thing, because I really feel like the podcast is giving me a great platform to talk to a lot of people over these through these electric circuits, and now I can go and talk to 4, 5, 6, 2,000, 3,000 people in person, and really touch them that way. So I think that's the next thing.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Great. So good. Anything else you want to share? Insights or challenges or how people reach you, any of that?
Insights and challenges. Let me see. Well, I would say, in terms of insights, anybody listening, all the things that we talked about today, um, it just takes a daily dedication to yourself, and that's it. It's the daily thing, and that's where I got tripped up for so many years, that I would do it for maybe 2, 3 days, and then not think about it, go back into my self-loathing for
Yeah.
and then come back to it. So, and when I say stay with it, doesn't mean you have successes every single day. It just means that you're dedicated to spending time on that process, whatever it is. I mean, you can't necessarily get into the weeds of it right now, but in terms of just working on those things that you want to work on to better yourself, whether it be spiritually, physically, mentally. Hal Elrod actually has a pretty good book that talks about sort of concept of sort of a daily, we'll call it a daily prayer for yourself. Not that you're praying for yourself, but you're giving attention to yourself in a specific way every day. It's called it, I'm losing it.
That's
But
cool. We'll find it. I'll put it in the show
look up
notes.
Hal Elrod. So I think just be patient with yourself. Have some daily dedication every day. Doesn't mean to perfect, but at least have it in your psyche every day. And I'm still challenged. Just things that I'm still challenged with. That at least I know that if I fall down, I'm gonna try to get up, and I'm gonna keep pushing forward. Um, People want to reach me, they can go to www.thetruthprescription.com. I'm also on Instagram at The Truth Prescription Podcast, and Twitter at Dr. Gathers. Um, yeah, I think that's it.
That's fabulous. That's fabulous. Daily dedication to yourself, I think, is a great bottom line. That it's like you won't have the big wins every day, but you know what? Getting through a day is sometimes the win. And so, right? So daily dedication to yourself, I think, is huge.
At the end of the day, if you can just, even if it was like a horrible day, had ice cream and apple pie for dinner, you screamed at your spouse, like the whole nutrition, the whole day, you didn't work out, the whole day was terrible. If you could at least just remember, just hold on to that little piece of, either self-love or self-reflection, or the little piece of something at the end of that day, it's a win. It's a win.
So good. Let's leave it there. That's awesome. Hold on to that little piece. Okay. Yeah. Dr. Gathers, thetruthprescription.com, The Truth Prescription Podcast. All that will be in the show notes. Thank you so much for joining me. All righty. Dr. G in the house. It's good. It's good stuff.
Let's do the bullshit. Let's do it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, this is One Sharp Sword, cutting through to what matters most. Thank you for listening.